So I don't want me just to die as a lawyer. I want me to die as a complete human being, somebody who dies as an expression of love for himself and for the universe. When it's my time, I really want to embrace that and take the next step. And if I'm only a lawyer and not as whole a human being as I can be, then that's going to be a way more difficult thing.
Hello and welcome to What is a Rite of Passage? Our guest today is Peter Lustig. Peter has been a landmark figure in the Victorian men's work scene for 20 to 30 years. He's just returned from a rite of passage of his very own, and we're blessed to have him here with us to share a bit of his journey. We acknowledge the Jara and the Gadabanud people, the traditional custodians of the land where this is being recorded. We acknowledge elders and knowledge holders, past, present and emerging, and may their ceremonies and initiations be remembered, and may this feed and heal the country on which we live, work and play.
Yeah, thank you, Damien. What a beautiful acknowledgement of country that was as well. And to me, that's entirely appropriate because we're doing our initiatory work on country. So I was delighted to hear you do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Where are you coming in from? What are you bringing right now?
Okay, so I'm sitting out of my window down here. I can see the Aire River. AIRE River. It's not a contradiction in terms. It's bloody cold at this time of year. And I'm about a kilometre that way from the Southern Ocean. So
Yep.
I'm in the middle of the Otways, down there probably about 10 or 15 k's away from Cape Otway itself. And I'm sitting on not quite 50 acres of pasture in temperate rainforest. And I feel I'm just incredibly blessed to be able to be here.
Beautiful, man.
Yeah. And I haven't been here for quite a while as we've been talking.
Where have you been?
Well, where haven't I been is probably an easier question to answer. I signed on last year, or actually the year before, to be part of a crew on one of 10 70-foot racing yachts doing a raced circumnavigation around the globe. So the short of it was that I started in England and ended up in South Korea and jumped off the boat there before eventually getting back home here. But in the meantime, visited, I don't know, lots of countries.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is sailing the thing that lights you up, man? I know you like to fly around on motorbikes, you sail around on boats.
Yeah.
Like, what is it that lights you up?
Lots and lots of things. I get passionate about being in community, being on country. Sailing is another thing. Riding my motorbike around here on the Great Ocean Road. Actually, my land is on both sides of the Great Ocean Road, so I'm hoping one day to put a toll gate up, but I'm not too confident that'll work. And actually, down that corner, there's where the land, the front paddock is like a triangle, and the river's on one side, and the Great Ocean Road goes over a bridge over the river. And there's a bunch of gum trees there, and people are forever stopping there and gawking at the koalas. So, I've been thinking of putting up a koala stand on just next to there and selling koala burgers and koala fur hats and beanies and koala juice, and koala skin beer stubby holders.
I know that spot.
Yeah. It's a river. It's a bit of a traffic hazard. Anyway, so that's where I am down here. And I'm sorry, I just don't recall your question exactly.
Perfect. Then we're in the right spot.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Oh, what am I passionate about? That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. My family and people I care about, which is a lot of people, helping people. Yeah. Helping myself, growing, deepening, being present. Yeah. That was a beautiful sigh.
Yeah, well, I just felt myself connecting
Yeah. I
with
got
you.
that. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, especially when you said helping myself. I decided to help myself in that moment with a nice big breath.
Yeah, thank you for that. I really felt that, and I agree that it deepened this connection. So I'm in gratitude for you for that, and for myself for allowing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Pete. I've got a bit of gratitude for you. We had a bit of a chat on the phone. It's funny, I've been thinking about you in the last couple of weeks, meaning to get in touch, and
Yeah.
turns out you've been back in the country for a couple of weeks, or back in the Otways at least for a couple of weeks. And I was recalling that very soon after I did my New Warrior training adventure in Queensland with Mankind Project, I jumped on an online I group that you were hosting, and you told me that there was a primary integration training happening in Melbourne. It was going to be a 10-week training that you were hosting, and a few other people. I attended that training and got to understand a lot more about iGroup format and some of the processes that I'd witnessed at my NWTA. But out of that, I formed so many other relationships, and from there sparked off into different trainings, facilitator training. I got, hooked up with Rob McClintock and Billy in the My
Right.
Still Place training. And
Beautiful.
it's taken me to another place in my life. So I really feel like you were a landmark there for me to go this way, and it was an opening and a deepening in my self understanding that I've really welcomed. So thank
Oh,
you.
wow. I had no idea, so thank you. I was just doing what I was doing, so whatever golden projection you want to throw at me, that's fine. Well, actually, it's not really fine, but to a degree, I'm prepared to put that cloak on.
Yeah,
My ego would be delighted in it. My meta awareness would sort of urge caution. Thank you, though, and I'm glad that I was
mm.
able to help you along your way. I mean, that's part of my mission on this planet. When I'm in my heart, I bring peace to the planet.
Is that your mission?
Yeah,
When you're in your heart, you bring peace to the planet.
yeah. Sadly, I've been a lot of my life. I lived my shadow mission, which was when I'm not in my heart, I'm a lightning rod for conflict. Unhappily, that still happens. I think it's that old adage of before enlightenment, there's chop wood, carry water, and then there's enlightenment. And then post enlightenment, you get to chop wood and carry water some more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they say, once you're enlightened, go and live with your parents and see if you're enlightened.
Yeah. Yeah. Go to an end of year celebration with your family of origin. Yeah, that's a beautiful test. Yeah. Well, funny you should say that because I've got three sisters, and we were all sort of in some way or another blown apart by the behaviour of our father, particularly, ably counterbalanced by the similar behaviour, well, not the same, but different behaviour of our mother. And it impacted us all pretty deeply. He was back then what you'd call manic depressive, these days bipolar. And in his manic phases, he was way, way, way out. And at times, although he never really hurt anyone, he appeared incredibly dangerous. And it impacted all of us sort of pretty deeply for about a year before I left. So this is be about maybe a couple of years ago. I started having sessions facilitated professionally with my three sisters, to start sharing stories of our childhood, because most of us were in the same incidents and saw them from different perspectives, because of our age differences and our gender differences and our experience differences. And hearing those stories from other people helped me to have a different perspective on each of those events, and to appreciate my sisters in different ways as well. And I hope that was mutual as well. So funny you should mention it, because I've just been thinking this last week that it'd be nice, while I've been away, I haven't been doing that, but it'd be nice to schedule another session or two just to keep it going.
That's a beautiful process. It's like willingly charting a map on the territory of a bunch of other people, which I find I have difficulty doing.
Yeah.
I kind
Yeah.
of stick to my own map a lot of the time.
Well, my worldview is pretty valid for me, but if I'm completely closed to other perspectives, then I guess I'm no longer growing. And if I'm no longer growing, I'm probably getting closer to dying, atrophying, becoming stagnant and stale. And the truth be known, I'd much rather be closer to my sisters than more distant. And I think one of the consequences of our upbringing and our family of origin was that to some extent, it blew us apart. And now that both of our parents have died, it seemed to me that I needed to pull it together a little. Caught myself there. And some of my sisters were not quite as willing as others, but that they all came to the party, which was really beautiful. And they've all said how touched they were by what took place after each time. So yeah, that's a rite of passage all by itself.
What a triumph.
Yeah, well, I think there's more work to do, which is why I was thinking about it. So thank you for that beautiful reminder.
Mm. Yeah, you're welcome, man. Again, happy to be that signpost.
Yeah.
The reason I was thinking about you is because, so what are we? I think I'm about 12 or 13 interviews into this project, and the project is essentially shaping up like a practitioner-focused conversations about rites of passage, contemporary rites of passage
Yep.
at this point, given that I'd had 10 years experience, but a whole bunch of confusion, or at least a whole bunch of questions. And the questions just didn't seem to get the bucket of questions didn't get smaller. They just got bigger and bigger and bigger.
Of
And
course.
so I took this project on just to start asking some of those questions. And the more
Right.
interviews I do, the more questions I get, but at least I'm in the process of asking questions.
The more I know, the more I know that I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. And so pathways comes up a bit, and your involvement in pathways.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then some of the things that took place after that, and yeah, bits and pieces of rumours and whatnot of other involvements that you've had in this men's and boys' rites of passage scene. And so I really wanted to get hold of you and get your take on all of that. But then
Great.
something came up in the conversation today where, we thought there was a possibility to track your recent journey around the world by sea under the framework of a hero's journey or a rite of passage. And so
Sure.
what have I got? I've made up some points. So we've got the separation, the descent, the challenge, the return, and the integration.
I would possibly swap the last two around. Integration,
So
and then the
integration,
integration is actually still continuing, but it's possibly meshed in with the return. But also often what comes after that is what we call a witnessing. So returning to a community
yes.
and being witnessed for who you've now become.
Okay. All right. I'm going to make a few little notes on that one.
I'm sure somebody else has mentioned Joseph Campbell to you.
Yep, they certainly
Okay.
have.
Good, good.
So where do you? We've got a little bit. We've got time. I don't want to. I want to blow over this at all. So if we've got the return, so where do we want to? We've got a return, a witnessing, and an integration. In the context, so we've had a challenge. I'm sure there's been a challenge somewhere there.
Let me go back. You may or may not be aware, or certainly I imagine many of your listeners might not be, or viewers. I'm a lawyer, or have been a lawyer for decades, probably over the last 15, maybe a bit more years. I've been training in and working as a collaborative practitioner. And the distinction is that most lawyers across the planet, in fact, almost all courts, what we call adversarial. So
Mm.
what that means is that, or rather the theory is that if one side presents what they regard as the truth and the other side does the same, then somebody in the middle can discern what the actual truth is and make a determination about that. The reality in law, however, is that it pays people to polarize, or rather to differentiate from each other, so that my story is very different and distinct from yours, because mine's the truth and yours is absolutely not true. And what that inevitably does is it polarizes everyone. And in other words, it sorts for for difference, which is pretty awful. And it means that, you end up having other people be your mouthpieces. It ends up being costly in terms of money, and it ends up being costly in terms of emotions and in terms of time spent. And most people go into courts, into court hearings, expecting and wanting justice, and they get instead law. This is a real shame. Compare that to a collaborative situation where we sought for what do you have in common. Often, in fact, collaborative work started in family law, although it's very, very useful in lots of other commercial areas. But where it started in family law, we would often get a couple together who are separating. They've got children. We might ask them, what are your hopes and dreams for your kids? What do you aspire them to become as human beings? And we record that somehow, whiteboarded or whatever. And nobody ever said that they want their child to be a Nazi, and to kill half the planet. Right? Everyone has dreams of their child being fully actuated, fully able to reach their potential as a human being, contribute to the evolution of life, love the universe and everything, have a happy life, a healthy life, find love, something along those lines. And we'd record it. So later on in a series of joint meetings where both parties are represented by collaboratively trained lawyers, somebody might start getting positional, or their behaviour might start getting a bit toxic or demanding or not understanding or not listening or some such. And at that point, one or other of us, in fact, often the opposite lawyer might remind that person, is your behaviour right now going to help your children to become that which you want them to be? Sure, they're not in the room, but they get the energy of this, even though they're not here. Yeah. So we're calling people to be their better selves rather than their bitter selves, perhaps is one way to put it. Yeah. And so to me, that's healing work. On the back of my almost antique now business cards, I've got peacemaking as a word, because when people heal and grow, peace is the result, whether within themselves or between people or in relationships or in communities. And to me, there's in a way no greater calling. So that was a prelude. So that work for me was and remains incredibly satisfying, actually really remunerative. And what I was finding was that I was doing more and more of the same thing. So different circumstances, different people. In essence, most of my clients over the last decade have been people who haven't learned a lesson. So the universe, as you know, teaches us lessons. I don't get the lesson. The lesson comes back to me in a different way, usually with more consequence, less avoidable. And if I keep on not getting the lesson, eventually it'll come through with some sort of legal sequelae or consequence as well. So people then say, look, I've got a legal problem here. I'll go and see Peter. And when they see me, I say, that's no problem. We can solve that easily. That's time, money, and emotions. That's all that we'll do. We can do that. That's the symptom, however. Are you interested in wondering why that's happening in your life? Why is it happening to you? Or better still, how come you drew that into yourself? How come you called that in? And very happily for me, a lot of my clients are open to hearing that question and then using the legal process to begin responding and growing past that lesson. So that's been amazingly satisfying for me. And what I found was that I was beginning to do the same thing over and over. As I said, different people, different circumstances. And I wondered, wow, I wonder if I can do something different. It almost felt as if my synapses and my neural pathways were sort of getting overused almost, and that what I needed to do is create some new ones. So, and plus I'm getting on a little bit age-wise, so I thought, well, okay, why don't I stop being a lawyer? That was a bit of a frightening thought. In fact, a lot of a frightening thought. And then this journey came up, circumnavigating the globe. I'd be gone for a year. I figured, wow, if I'm gone for a year, maybe most of my clients would abandon me, because I was just unavailable. and I thought, wow, and by the way, I haven't sailed all the oceans of the world, and I remember as a kid once upon a time, I thought, gee, that'd be a really cool thing to do. So I signed on. I actually took it to that open circle on Zoom at one point and did a King's Chair. which is
Mm.
one of the few times in a men's circle that we can ask for and receive advice from others. That was quite instrumental in helping me to sign on, and that's what I did. It was quite a job to close up my practice, at least substantially, um, hand over a number of files to other practitioners. What else? Organise for my house to no longer be occupied by me anyway. My younger son, Indy, is here most but not all of the time. And generally let go of a whole heap of stuff, including all sorts of relationships as well. And to go across to England and do some training there, and then eventually jump on a boat and sail from England or Portsmouth in England to Porto Sherry in Spain, and from there to Punta del Este in Uruguay, across the Atlantic, and then back across the Atlantic to Cape Town, and from there to Fremantle, and then round the south of Tassie to Airlie Beach, up to Subic Bay in the Philippines, Qingdao in China, and Tonyang in South Korea. So in all of that time when I was at sea, I didn't have any internet. And so every time we made landfall, which was maybe for a week or 10 days, apart from spring cleaning the boat and doing repairs and maintenance and the like, and buying litters for the next leg and doing crew changeover. Some of the crew were often changing over. I was catching up on, that's what's happened to this matter. But, mostly people knew. Every now and then I'd get an email out of the blue and I'd say, well, I can't really help you right now. Can you wait? Shall I refer you? So, yeah. And then there was another big part of it. I mean, part of the challenge was that I didn't know in what way or ways I might be challenged. And because I couldn't get into America, the Yanks required not an ESTA, which is something you can get when you're coming in by a registered carrier. The crowd clipper who were organising and running the race were not a registered carrier, so we had to apply for a thing called a B2 visa, which I did, and that included an interview. And at the interview, the guy who was interviewing me, either an American or an Aussie working in the Melbourne consulate, asked me a question, which was essentially, look, you've been arrested back in 2004, which I had been. Why did you lie on your arrest 8 years ago? And I said, I don't think that's right. And I didn't have it in front of me and I couldn't remember it. It was 8 years previous. He had it in front of him. But the ESTA actually says, have you ever been arrested or convicted of a crime involving serious injury to persons or property, serious damage to property or injury to persons? And I correctly answered no, because my conviction was for something quite different and didn't involve any of that. He didn't qualify the question when he asked me, and ended up over 11 months of sending emails, most of which were not responded to, stringing me along, and eventually refused my visa on the basis that I'd lied to him. It lied to the State Department in getting that ESTA 8 years ago, when in actual fact that's not correct. So I wasn't going to get into the States. As a fallback mechanism, I had actually applied for and got an ESTA myself, so I thought, well, I'll fly from South Korea eventually to the States. I'll see friends there and I'll rejoin the boat when it gets to Seattle, sailing down through Panama Canal and back, and get off in Panama before it goes back to Washington, D.C., and then get on in Washington and take the boat across to Oban in Scotland before returning to Portsmouth. But along with the refusal of the B2, they said, oh, by the way, and we've also cancelled your ESTA. There's no appeal. So, yeah, I'm still dealing with the fallout from that, and it's certainly something I hadn't thought about or contemplated. I've been to the States a few times, in fact, since 2004, so, and never with any trouble. So I got a lot more than I bargained for or anticipated or expected, and that in itself was quite a lesson rolling with that.
It sounds like the challenge came before the departure.
The setup for it did, yeah, but the end result of that didn't until, I mean, before I left, this was in February, I think, last year. and I made it known that I was leaving in July. It might have been even been earlier, because that's when the fleet left. Yeah, they just didn't get back to me in time, and I kept on contacting them by phone and by email, and nothing seemed to move them. It's really sad, and cost me a lot of time and money and effort and energy. And what I'm left with is something I'm not very good at, which is acceptance and surrender. So it was a pretty big exercise in that. Yeah, so coming back, you can see behind me a whole heap of books and stuff, that are part of my legal practice. And, I've spent a couple of weeks collating, 10 months of MasterCard statements and bank statements, reconciling them and catching up on monthly trust account statements, all of which was zero. And I'm sort of now at a point, and a number of files where people were still instructing me as a lawyer, and I'm pretty much on top of it now. And what I'm noticing is things like getting up in the morning and hurrying to get out of bed to have something to eat and to get in front of my laptop and start doing some work, and having to stop myself and say, hang on a moment, I'm not doing that stuff anymore, or at least no longer doing it unconsciously. Sure, there's a bit of stuff to mop up with, and sure, I might even take new instructions if the matter is interesting enough and relevant enough, and I'm clear that I can really help. No longer identifying myself so much as a lawyer or a collaborative practitioner and mediator for that matter. I've been delving quite deeply into a whole heap of trauma work, including my own trauma from my childhood that I referred to earlier. And I've been doing some online courses with a fellow named Thomas Hubel, if others have heard of him. Quite fascinating. The only trouble with it is it's at 2 o'clock in our morning. After standing watches and 4 hours on, 4 hours off, it's not such a difficult thing to get up at 1:45 in the morning and be awake for a couple of hours. So yeah, I think I'm still integrating. No, I don't think I am. I know that I am, and I'm learning to not drop back into the places where I identified as being me. That's who I am. That's what I do. And to deliberately allow those to atrophy, in the interest of becoming whatever it is I'm going to be, which I suspect will be a counsellor. I'm pretty close to signing up to do a counselling degree or diploma of some sort. So there.
Yeah. Beautiful. I'm certainly tracking you through my own kind of journey and transition professionally. So what I heard is that you closed your practice down, you passed some clients on, you left the country, and now you're integrating into a new version or somebody else, somebody that you're finding. How did the journey shape this transition? Or can you speak to the threshold was there a threshold while you were away that you had to cross into this new way of being?
I suppose one of the thresholds for sure was the fact that I didn't have any internet connectivity or phone connectivity while I was at sea. Yeah, I literally sailed away from shore, not knowing what I'd find. I mean, Pema Chodron talks about that. Talks about the courage of sailors, in days gone by, who would cast off from the wharf and sail over the horizon, not knowing whether or not they had the courage or the tools or the know-how or the experience to meet whatever it is that they were going to meet over there. And I think to some degree, everyone on board the boat is in that same boat, myself included. Yeah, and we all met it in different ways. That was pretty interesting. and and deepening the camaraderie between myself and the crewmates. That was pretty beautiful. Learning, finding myself learning a whole heap. I've done a fair bit of sailing in the past, and I've sailed from Sydney around to Fremantle, around the south of Australia, up to the northwest a couple of times, out to Montebello's, across from Geraldton to Carnarvon to Cocos Island to Mauritius, Reunion, Durban, Cape Town. So I wasn't a stranger to sailing, and yet I found that I was learning heaps and heaps, particularly from the skipper. So yeah, that was really, really a beautiful thing, actually. found that maybe what it means is that when I'm learning, I'm moving myself out of ruts that I've created over time. This is how I do things, and this is what I'm used to, and this is inside my comfort zone. So it was really placing myself deliberately outside my comfort zone. But as we say in the Mankind Project, with the new warrior training, the idea is to create a container where men can actually step outside their comfort zone and have what we call paradoxically a safe emergency. Being outside my comfort zone far enough to get some new learning and some new understanding, but not so far out that I crash and burn. And happily, we didn't crash and burn on the boat. We lost a sail one time, which was a first for the skipper, but there you go.
That's great. There's like a part when I was sort of just jotting down those framework points for a rite of passage or a hero's journey. There's like somewhere around the descent
Yeah.
is this connection piece. And certainly on the first day of the teenage boys event that we do, yeah, the first day is massively about connection. And I was wondering how that works, but you say it's just you connecting with the crew, everyone connecting with their own version of their challenge, learning. Yeah, can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, well, the first leg was literally from, well, it was at Portsmouth to Porto Sherry in Spain. So we traversed the English Channel and then rocked into the Bay of Biscay, which is apparently only about 60 metres deep. And we had quite a big wind, like we had winds up to 50, 55 knots. Seas were 4 to 5 metres, which means that, you're looking at 10-metre crest to trough. And the boat is like 40 tons and 70 foot long, and it was literally going over a wave and then crashing down to into the trough. And in that sort of weather, we're all whenever you're on deck, we were wearing life jackets, blow up ones, so they were quite streamlined, but we're also tethered. And one point, myself and two other people got thrown across the stern of the boat, and I ended up landing on that little finger, which is still a bit crooked. 11 months later, it's still sore. So the other guy cracked some ribs, and the woman got quite badly bruised. So it wasn't without its actual and potential dangers. But coming through that, and then we also lost a sail as well. We put a spinnaker up, and the wind came up to about, at that point, about 30, 35 knots. One of the sheets, which is what controls the two bottom corners of the spinnaker, broke, and then we couldn't pull it in. I was off watch at the time, and I heard this commotion going on, and I jumped out of my bunk and got up on deck with my life jacket on, but otherwise just with a pair of shorts. And we were all trying to pull this sail in, and we'd bring it in 2 or 3 meters, and then the wind would somehow or other catch it and blow it out. And we were holding on, and if you held on, you'd literally be lifted into the air. So 4 or 5 of us out of a crew of, I think, 18 at that point, joined the boat's flying club, because we literally got thrown around the boat. Happily we were still tethered, and very luckily nobody was badly injured. There was a few bruises around, but nobody was injured. But in the end, the skipper did the seaman-like thing, and we just let it go. It was like, oh, yeah, which didn't do our race results very good, but there you go. He did the right thing, and he sat us down, and we put the kettle on, and he sat down and he said, we're racing, but that's a game. My first obligation here is to keep everyone safe, and it was masterful, actually. So that was some of the descent. And in going through things like that, it helped us to coalesce as a crew. We got better and better with each leg, with different conditions, learning how to meet them, learning how to do sail changes more quickly and more effectively and more appropriately as well. And everyone beginning to be able to multitask, whether it's going up on the foredeck during a sail change, or being in the cockpit and working on one of the grinders or one of the sheets controlling the sail, all sorts of different roles, and knowing them well enough then everyone became pretty much interchangeable. Although, at the end of the day, some people were better at some things than others. And finding that within you. I had a real challenge early on. I was one of the better helmsmen, and what I discovered was that going downhill, that is with the wind behind me, I wasn't as good as I thought I was, and I had a lot of learning to do. When you helming a 70-foot boat that weighs 40 tons, it's got a huge amount of sail up, and there's 25 knots of wind or thereabouts blowing, and you're screaming along at 15 to 20 knots, like that's fast enough to water ski behind. You've got to really be on the ball. And because the boat is so big and so heavy, you actually have to, when something's about to happen, you actually have to act before it happens. And then it happens, and then you stop reacting to it, and it's still happening, and then it stops happening, and the boat's in the right spot. It's very much about being able to feel the boat and anticipate it. And that was a whole learning curve for a lot of us. And then there was the integration of how we all interacted as a crew. We had 2 watches, and we were sleeping 4 hours on, 4 hours off. And in bad weather, that means that by the time I come off a watch, take off my wet weather gear, go to the head, the toilet, maybe have something to eat or drink, get into my bunk, which I'm sharing with somebody who's just going on watch, and get to sleep, and then get up again about an hour and a half to 2 hours later and do the whole thing all over again. That can be pretty testing. How do I cope with 4 hours on, 4 hours off, 24/7? There's actually 4 hours on, 4 hours off during the day, and 6 at night. Although in the hot weather, in the hot weather we did 6 at night, and in the warmer weather, in the cooler weather we did 6 during the day. But anyway, we never had much more than about 4 hours sleep in a row. I had amazing dreams, so it was often that I'd wake up in the middle of my REM sleep, so I'd be full of dreams, and there'd be time to get up for the next watch or get ready for the next watch. And because I was waking up in the middle of them, I was remembering them. So that was lots of fun, and a good way to continue or begin integrating as well.
Yeah.
One of the things I didn't like about it was sort of, well, I guess maybe didn't like is too strong, but we'd get ashore at a stop, and we'd end up doing a lot of drinking. So there's a huge drinking culture in that. And, while sometimes when I drank, I thoroughly enjoyed it and got pretty happy. But before I went on the voyage, if I had 2 stubbies inside of the same night, I'd just about be on the face. And these days I'm sort of weaning myself off it again now, but when I came back, 2 stubbies wouldn't have touched sides. I'm quite happy not to, and the same with coffee. I'd come off watch at 8 in the morning, get out of my gear, have some breakfast, have a mug full of black coffee, fresh black coffee, and go into my bunk and go to sleep, instead of what I had beforehand, which is maybe 1 or 2 cups of coffee a week. So lots of interesting changes. Yeah.
Thanks, Pete. We were sort of discussing that framework before around the return and being witnessed.
Yeah.
And the integration, being seen coming home, being acknowledged as transformed, I guess would be one way of putting it. Yeah. Anything you'd like to share about those points?
Yeah. Well, at each stopover, they had sort of prize nights. So that was part of being witnessed, but that was more part of the race, who got the most points and who got in first and stuff like that. And I think my being witnessed is very much more about my family and people who are close to me noticing whatever they notice. And I suppose I'm doing the new warrior training. I'm staffing it in a week and a half or so. So who knows what people might observe there. But I think I've grown. And yeah, well, I bloody well hope so, because I don't want to be the
Yeah.
same person anymore. Well, I am the same person, but I don't want to continue behaving in exactly the same way. I'd like to think that I'm perhaps a little wiser, and It's perhaps paradoxical, but can I aspire to be humble? I suppose I can. Although the very aspiring of humility is the very opposite of being humble, I guess. So there was one guy on the boat who definitely was humble. He was amazing. Yeah. Always ready to help, always smiling, always able to fix things, and he never grandstanded or anything of the sort. He was a beautiful, beautiful inspiration. And sadly, after I got off the boat, he got thrown across the boat. He was still tied on, but he got thrown across the boat, broke his leg and a couple of ribs and a finger or two, and got
Oh.
chopped off into a hospital in Japan from the North Pacific.
Oh.
Yeah, sad. Beautiful young man, though. Well, not done 60 something. From my perspective, the longer than
Yeah, sure. And you're saying that you're in this integration period at the moment. You mentioned before that there's probably aspects of your personality, older aspects that are continuing to try and come to life, and that's a bit of work. And
yeah,
how are you integrating?
not falling into the old habits the idea that I'm still a lawyer and that I've got to sit down and I've got to put some hours in and be able to bill people and for doing good work, hopefully, all of that stuff. And instead spending more time in country here, working on the land that I steward at the moment, being in touch with other people, developing myself, for example, with the trauma programs that I'm part of at the moment. Learning and learning in ways that are different to how I've been learning previously. And as I said, seriously considering signing on to do some study, which is a bit frightening
Mm.
given that I haven't done any formal study for a decade or three, if not more. So yeah, that's sort of, yeah, I wonder how I'll do, but I think I'll find out by actually just doing it and being there.
Yeah, it's a beautiful modeling for me. I've been a builder for 30 years and I've gotten to a point where I'm unable to keep doing it.
Yeah.
I've got an opportunity. Currently got no staff. I've got no contracts ahead of me. I've got an opportunity to kind of exit myself from it. And I've also started the therapeutic coaching course with Primal Intelligence with
Oh,
Stephen
nice.
Uri.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I'm at this threshold in my life where my intention was to do a soft shift, but my being just won't really show up to that work at the moment.
Yeah. Wow.
And so whatever judgments that I've got about being too old or not learning or whatever, it's really comforting to see you out there in the beyond modeling a very similar kind of
Yeah.
mission, I
Yeah, I
suppose.
can't imagine me being a full-time lawyer again, ever, frankly. I can
Mm.
imagine me doing occasional work, and particularly in the collaborative sphere and certainly mediations, but it's not where my heart is any longer. Yeah. But I'm interested in finding a builder. No, I'm serious. I've got a shearing shed here, and I was busy turning it into a retreat space, and the builder, sadly, and I thought I'd come back and it'd be done. We've got most of the
Oh,
materials and we had the design and stuff, and sadly he's got some sort of ailment. So as a result of which almost nothing was done in my absence. So
oh.
if you're interested in a bit of work here and there, I might be able to.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see. We'll see. That might test the courage of my conviction.
There you go. Well, what we could do is, have you work for 3 hours and then study for two or something like that.
Just a different way. That's right.
Yeah, yeah. And it's the same with me, like in the right circumstances, I'll take on another client as a lawyer. What
Yeah.
exactly the right circumstances are, I'm not really sure at this point, but, I'm sure they would be self-evident once they appear. So, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So rites of passage, hey? In a way, they're underrated in our culture
Tell
anyway.
me more.
Well, you mentioned you were doing teenage boys. So, was a Pathways leader for about 7 years. Pathways was a national not-for-profit that did contemporary rites of passage for young girls and boys stepping towards adulthood. So for boys, that would generally be 13 to 15-year-olds, occasionally 12s and occasionally 16s. And we'd be out on country for 5 days, ideally with their dad, but an uncle or a grandparent if need be. And it was amazing work and it was beautiful. And that's only one rite of passage though. And there's heaps and heaps more. There's another, when as a teenager I leave home, or as a young
Mm.
adult I leave home. There's another, then I start dating or going out with other people in a romantic sense. There's another, for example, getting married is a pretty well-known one. But yeah, lots and lots of different rights all over the place. Changing what you're doing, leaving your work of 30 years and beginning to retrain in a different area. I wonder
Mm.
what sort of ceremony and what sort of ritual, if any, have you brought to that to mark it, to acknowledge yourself for the man that has somehow or other survived 30 years of being a builder and has no doubt built some gorgeous, beautiful structures and has no doubt as well fucked up badly at times, even if you got away with it. And to be able to acknowledge that in a way that honours it and honours the person that you're having to be in all that time, and presumably you were being a provider, whether it's just for yourself or for others as well in that period as well. And what it cost you, because there must have been some part of you that appreciated and loved it, but there might have been parts of you which became increasingly loud, which had you stop doing that and now move towards the therapy skills and training that you're doing now. So on some level, it might not have always been where your heart was, and yet you still kept doing it. So I know I kept doing the law partly because it's what I was just used to and who I was. But there was also part of it that was motivated by the money, the income that I could generate doing it. And there was some part at least of recognizing that when people asked me to do work for them, I was wanted. Right? And I was bloody good at it. If,
Mm.
not always, but mostly I was pretty bloody good at it. And so continuing to do something that I was pretty damn good at helped to affirm who I was in the world. And at some point, I know I'm going to die. So I don't want me just to die as a lawyer. I want me to die as a complete human being, somebody who dies as an expression of love for himself and for the universe. When it's my time, I really want to embrace that and take the next step. And if I'm only a lawyer and not as whole a human being as I can be, then that's going to be a way more difficult thing. So
Mm.
the lessons I learnt at sea and returning around surrender and around acceptance, for me, are pretty important. And doing what brings joy to my heart becomes more and more important the older I get. And what I'm seeing, what I was saying essentially was that there must have been some degree of resistance in your heart, otherwise you'd still be being a builder, maybe. So to the extent that you were able to keep doing it despite everything, maybe that is due some honouring and some appreciation and some acknowledgement for who you've been being. And
Mm.
and then letting it go. My
Yeah.
earlier this afternoon, I caught up with my ex-wife Tina, who lives in Tassie now, and we've done a huge amount of work around ending our marriage, which ended back in 2017. So it's been 7 or 8 years, what in now, and coming on to 9 years actually. A couple of years ago, I went down to Tassie, and I used to go down annually, and I catch up with people like Garth, and other friends, and with her, Tina is her name, and I'd say, find a restaurant. The brief is be lavish, and we'd walk and talk and then eat and talk some more and then walk some more and talk some more. And a couple of years ago, instead of just doing that, we spent a whole day together doing that in Hobart. And she lives in
Mm.
Cygnet, and I ended up getting an Airbnb down that way, and I spent 3 or 4 half days again with her down there. And what we did is we spoke all the stuff that hadn't yet been spoken, or which might have been, but with the passage of time, there was a new take on it or some aspect of it that I could share. And some of it was pretty hard to hear and some of it was beautiful and everything in between. And we spent all that time doing that and getting the relationship as complete as we could so that we both ended up not having to hold the energy of stuff that was unexpressed, if that makes sense. And at the end of it, I don't know if you know Ho'oponopono, the Hawaiian blessing of "I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you." And we just spoke that to each other. Yeah, one of the disappointments of my travels was that I'd actually booked an Airbnb in Oban in Scotland, and she and our daughter were going to join me there, and it would have been the first time we were together since we separated. And she was going to do a poetry walk with David White, and then go on to Scotland and catch up with me when the flu arrived there. I was just talking to her. She's put the walk off to next year, and we've left open the possibility of having an adventure somewhere together. But I've got to a place where I just love her to bits, and I doubt if I'd ever want to live with her again. But I just regard her as a beautiful human being. I'm so grateful for her. And some of that voyage has given me that perspective as well. Why I told that story, though, was to reflect on the capacity of bringing ceremony to an ending.
It sounds similar to the ceremony you brought with your siblings.
Yeah, interestingly enough, yeah, you're right. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, yeah. I think there's some difference. I think with my siblings, it's about helping each other to heal more. I suppose with Tina it's similar, but for Tina and I think both of us, our separation was fabulous in that it enabled both of us to grow considerably beyond where we had been then. And it felt more like an energy release rather than a healing, although I'm sure it had healing elements to it. Most people seem to think that having a separation is a disaster, but I regard it as an incredible spiritual opportunity for growth.
Yeah, I'm separating with my oldest daughter's mother was the most difficult heart and body and soul wrenching experience I'd ever had.
Yeah, wow.
And what I gained from that was a phenomenal strength and an ability to feel in this world that I might never have discovered.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Have you expressed gratitude to her for that?
Yeah, I
Good
have.
on you. Good on you. I'm delighted to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And hearing the thoroughness of your path with your ex-wife, I might not have been as thorough as you, but I definitely kept coming back
Yeah.
to expose myself however I did at the time and to have the impacts of that and however that worked. And also had a daughter in the mix and whose life experience was impacted by the way that we related.
Yeah.
And we've gotten to a point where it feels clean.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that gorgeous? And your daughter will appreciate that immensely.
She does.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you. That was a beautiful connection. Is there anything more you think or feel or want to say about the topic or anything else in closing or your
I'm
integration?
just looking out the window to this side, which is where the Southern Ocean
Mm,
is, and
mm.
there's this beautiful, soft, warm, pinkish glow over the sand dunes. And it feels like night is falling on and very appropriate for us to be ending around now.
Right.
I'm really appreciative of this opportunity, so thank you. Some of what I've spoken, I haven't spoken before. As it is in a men's circle where, in a talking circle, sometimes being able to just bring out what's in here and confine it into words and speak it and to be witnessed or heard can be pretty important. So I'm feeling a little emptier and more grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really grateful as well, Pete, for the connection and then also for your willingness to jump on and do this. Yeah, it certainly made it very easy to happen. And I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and I think it brings another aspect to the topic that builds this understanding. So thank you.
Great. Do we want to put in an ad for the new warrior training coming up right at the end?
Yeah, what's a new warrior training, and what would you like to say about it, Pete?
Oh, well, it's an adult male rite of passage program. It's been running through the Mankind Project for about 35 years worldwide. And participants who come to us, it's all about helping them to align their head, their heart, and their belly. So when I'm acting with those when I'm expressing myself with those being congruent with each other, then I'm more rather than less likely to be being authentic and deeply in doing what I'm supposed to do and being whom I'm supposed to be. So I guess the elevator speech is something like this: if you're the man that you were born to be, don't do it. And conversely, if you're not, at least not yet, it gives you, whether or not you've done a heap of personal growth work or not, it's a great way, because I've done a heap of stuff, and it's one of the best, if not the best way in which you can get a real move along on that pathway of personal growth, so that you start to narrow that gap. As I said, I wouldn't like to die with any regrets. And I suspect that if I didn't eventually become the man that I was really born to be, then there might be some. So doing this work, doing the men's work, doing the healing work, following what's in here, and doing it with authenticity and integrity is pretty important to me. If it's important to others, then I totally recommend it. And for what it's worth, if anyone wants to contact me to talk about it, you're certainly welcome. Or they can go to a website, nkpau.org. And the training lasts
Right.
from late Friday afternoon to a Sunday afternoon. And that's the separation from community, being faced with the challenge, and the challenge is of your own making. We hold the container, that's we the staff, and we actually get there a day or so early and do a lot of our own work, so that by the time the participants rock up, that staff container is clear and clean. I've owned whatever shadows might be on board here, stuff that might be driving me unconsciously, particularly where I'm not being my word, either to myself or to others, and any interpersonal stuff that's going on, we get clean with that. So when the participants arrive, they have a container in which they can, as I said before, have a safe emergency, be able to step beyond their own comfort zones as far as they choose, so that they can actually learn and grow. So yeah.
Thanks, Pete. There's a training in June in Melbourne. There's a training end of June in Sydney, and that information will be available on the Mankind Project AU website, won't it?
Yeah, it will be. And actually, there's one in July in Queensland as well. And if you're uncertain and you don't get in touch with anyone to talk about it, come along on Monday night in Prahran. That's Monday night, the King's birthday holiday weekend, which is, I think, that's Monday the 8th at Grattan Street Community Centre in Prahran. It's 6:30 for a 7 o'clock start, or 6 for a 6:30. It's called the Homecoming, and that's the witnessing, and that's a ceremony run by the women. And it's where men who've done the training come and speak about who they've become as a result of the training. And it's always an incredible, heartful, gorgeous experience. Often the women speak as well, sometimes children. So yeah, anyone's most welcome to come along and have a look, experience
That's
it.
reminded me, I'm not doing the Grantville training, but I think I might try and get to the Homecoming, because
Yeah.
that's such a powerful event.
It is,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah. So thank you, Damien. And yeah, let's talk about that building contract.
Well, I do like the Otways, mate. I
Well,
do
there you
love
go.
the Otways.
And I've got Starlink here, so unfortunately I'm funding Elon, but it's pretty good internet.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, much appreciated, man. We can end the recording there and, yeah, wrap up at the end of it. But again, thanks, man.
Yeah. Thank you. It's really appreciated.